Hi, Todd Kerns. I'm from B Plus Talent Agency. I'm reading for the part of Dr. Drake from Moray. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the wrong tape. Hi, everybody. Todd Dammit Kerns here. Today, my very very special guest is Jeff Pilson, who I saw perform in 1985 when I was but a lad. They were opening for an up and coming group called Kiss when he was in a group called Dokken, and he had a major impact on me as the bass player in that band. He, of course, has been a member of Foreigner for quite some time now. He has gone back and forth with different versions of Dokken, T and N with George Lynch, and then he's on the N Machine with Robert Mason. He's done all kinds of great things. He is the best. One of my heroes, Jeff Pilson.
Okay.
How very professional.
Yeah.
How are you, man?
I'm good. I'm really good.
It's been way too long. Wow.
Yeah, I know. I don't even know if I want to think about. I mean, I remember seeing you at a Slash show, but that was even before the reunion. So
I know. I think I've seen you do Foreigner several times, but I don't think I bothered to
oh,
harass you. So I think
oh,
I've probably seen you and then
please
kind of like
harass next time.
yeah, next time I'll be harassing. Yeah. I'll be
Thank you.
the talking
I'll
about the
take
pet.
anything I can get nowadays. Actually, you got some nice guitars back there too, and a cool stand-up bass. Love that.
Yeah, this is Slim Jim Phantom used to come, around and I thought, well, if I'm going to jam with Slim Jim, I have to do it, right. So
Wow, cool.
and by right, I mean like, faking my way through because you think, okay, well, that you buy that thing and you realize it's a completely different animal like
Oh, it is a different animal. Yes, that's right. But
and to do it right, it's that whole like your right hand is all chewed up and I'm like, dude,
yeah, I know.
it's a whole other
Left
thing.
hand too. I mean, those.
Yeah, and yeah, because you're like flying blind without frets. So I'm kind of like, okay,
Right.
but I got really into it for a while, and then I kind of, like other things took priority, like gigs and stuff.
Like, yeah,
Yeah, and life exactly.
yeah.
So it's actually that actually brings us to an interesting point because I just actually spoke to Billy Sheehan, which was actually kind of an interesting, bass centric, you know,
Yes.
hole to go down because but even with yourself, did you start as a bass player? I actually always meant to ask you this because I
Um,
know I think that and briefly you did like the thing where you played guitar and fronted. Um,
right. But I actually did start on bass. It was the first thing I mean, I actually I started playing cello in fifth grade.
oh, okay. Well, there's your
Um, yeah, and so that was actually the first thing. But then when I was in sixth grade, some guys came up to me on the school playground, and they actually heard me singing, and they said, "Hey, we're starting a band. Would you sing?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." Sixth grade. They said, "Hey, and we don't have a bass player. Would you play bass too?" I was like, "Sure." And I had a paper out at the time, so I went out and bought a $35 Tiesco Del Rey bass and a $35 Gibson Skylark amp, and I was set to rock, and that's how I started playing bass.
wow,
Yeah,
$70 and your whole career is just like
which
set.
was a big expenditure for me, and my parents thought I was crazy.
$35.
Yeah,
That deal does not exist today.
of course not.
So I like how the impetus to do this is because you're in a band. So you need an amp, you need a bass. It's kind
Yeah,
of like
yeah.
it's
I
not
need to
like
learn how to play it too.
yeah, exactly. I was gonna say it's like just hit the ground running, like boom.
Yeah. Well, of course, the band never happened, but
Well,
but it got me going. So I'm grateful for it's guys that I actually still know, and it's
that is so funny. So did they ever go on to be musical in any fashion, or was it
well,
just
I
kind of
ended
like a
up. Yes, they did. I ended up leaving. This was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I was living there at the time, but I ended up leaving the next year. And but then as they carried on through the rest of junior high and high school, yeah, they started to get into bands and do the whole thing. But I was doing it, and I was doing it, of course, but on the West Coast because I had moved to the state of Washington. So,
oh, that's right. So you grew up, you split your time between Wisconsin and then Washington.
well, yeah, I mean, I was actually born in Chicago,
Oh,
lived
okay.
in New York a couple years, then lived in Milwaukee until I was 13. then moved to the state of Washington because my dad got transferred. He was my stepdad, but we were all
Hmm.
living together. So I moved to the state of Washington when I was 13.
Wow. So when you talk about your parents thinking you're crazy, was this kind of like, were they supportive of this wacky idea of playing music, or was it sort of like, well,
Like all parents at the time, they kind of viewed it as a distraction, but they
sure.
tolerated it. Um, my mom ended up becoming supportive, and eventually even my stepdad became very supportive. But
Well, yeah, once
that
you've proven yourself,
yeah, I
then
was
all of
gonna
a
say
sudden, yeah.
that was. But I mean, even before Dokken, they were trying to be supportive, but when Dokken happened, then they said, okay, he could actually make a living doing this. So
Well, exactly. I think that's the big thing for any parent is as
yeah,
long as they know you're okay, then
I get it. I get it. I've got a 17-year-old daughter, so I get it.
exactly. Is she musical?
She is. She does play
Oh,
cello.
by the
Um,
way, she's 17 now, dude. I remember when she was born. That's so
yeah.
crazy.
No,
Yeah.
I know. Pretty crazy.
I know.
Um, but yeah, she plays cello. She keeps one of my basses in her room and does play little bass things. It's purely. She's really academic. I mean,
Right.
she's seriously into school, and the school she goes to is
Great.
heavy duty academics. But she does play bass. I have the multi-tracks to Come Together by the Beatles
Sure,
because
yeah.
she learned it. So I had her come in here and I recorded her. I muted Paul McCartney and I had her play with the Beatles. It was a cool thing. I mean, she was tripping, but
That's a trip. Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
yeah.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? So did you find that like learning with cello and stuff like that, reading music, does that something you've retained, or is that something that's kind of like, I mean, rock and roll is sort of not
Not
about that
reading it.
necessarily. Yeah.
I've retained it, but barely. I
Yeah.
mean, like in a very limited capacity. Were I to have to go up and sight read something, I'd be lost. No, or I'd just be really slow.
Right.
But I can read, and I'm amazed at like when I'm looking at piano stuff or orchestral stuff because we've been doing orchestral stuff with Foreigner. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm the musical director, so I do actually have to do some reading of the orchestral stuff, and I'm kind of amazed at how much I did retain. But
Cool.
I mean, the conductor of the Los Angeles Philharmonic has nothing to fear right now. Let's put
Well, that's what I see. I never grew up in that at all. I was just
so
right away picked up a guitar and was in a band playing,
rock and roll. Yeah,
making a bunch of racket. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, I
But
did that too.
yeah, exactly. But did you find that when you picked up the bass guitar, did you apply any of that cello stuff, the four strings? What is the tuning
Well,
on? What is the tuning on a cello? I don't mean
cello
to be
tuned in fifths, and it's low C, so it's
okay.
C G D A.
So it
Uh,
doesn't apply to the bass guitar
so
really
it,
at
it
all.
didn't apply in that sense. No.
No.
I don't know how did I don't think so. I think I've kind of approached them differently. Um, I suppose there's always a good thing when you learn any kind of music because you learn relationships of intervals and all that kind of stuff,
Totally.
and I think that helped. Um, but most of my bass playing was approached purely from a I'm listening to records and playing along to a records approach. So
Right.
a
Yeah.
classic way to learn, but a great way to learn.
Well, who were your guys? Like what was the stuff you were into?
Okay, when I first started, I loved Jack Bruce. Not that I
Sure.
could play a lot of his stuff when I first started, but I was into that. And then when I was 15 or 16, probably just 16, I heard Chris Squire for the first time.
Right, yeah.
And somebody played me Roundabout, and that changed my life immediately. I mean,
Right.
because I had been playing with my fingers. I had a Gibson EB3 was the bass that I was playing.
That
The
was my
minute I
first
heard,
bass. My first bass is an EB3. I
oh,
still have
well,
it. It's out back.
oh,
Yeah.
you still have, oh man. Well,
Yeah.
mine was actually a piece of crap, to be honest with you. It was a 73 that we
Okay.
bought new, and
Okay.
that was like the worst year. They had just left. I have a 69 EB3 now
Ooh, cool.
that's really cool, which was still the cool design, but the one I had was anyways.
Right.
But as soon as I heard Squire, I'm like, okay, he's playing it with a pick for sure. So I
Yeah.
started playing with a pick immediately, and I completely overnight changed. I ended up getting a Rickenbacker, played through a stack of 12s. I mean, the whole bit. Learned every Yes song on every every bass part on every record. Really, really got serious, and that's what really got me serious about bass was Chris Squire. That's when I really fell in love with it, and that's when I knew this is what I have to do.
That's interesting because when usually it's as a bass player who plays with a pick, and I've always, because I'm the same way, even though people know me as sometimes as a guitar player or a singer or whatever, but I started on bass. It was one of my first love was doing that, but
Right.
and then you win it, which is the wrong way to say it, because I think you probably played the same game of like when you're the best worst singer, whatever's kind of, when you go around the room and it's like, well, he can kind of sing, so you're the singer now. You're like, oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. There was a bit of that, sure.
That's usually the way it goes. Is like
Yeah.
everybody tries to sing, and then they just kind of end up handing it off to the guy who can kind of sing, But my thing is, though, as a bass player who kind of grew up going like, I'm going to be like, take your pick. I was like really into punk rock and stuff like that. So it was always a guitar pick, Paul McCartney, guys like that.
Yep.
But did you ever find as a bass player, because it happens to me on occasion too, where it's, serious bass players, they play, it's the bass always kind of looks like it was made out of a coffee table, and it's really high, and the fingers, you know what I mean? Which I really appreciate, because I get around on my fingers, but I never felt like I ever needed to go there, because my favorite guys were all pick guys. Yeah.
I was I was that way for a long time, and then over the last 20-25 years, I've fallen in love. Like I'll tell you, when I got into Dio in '93,
yeah,
that made me really fall in love with bass again, because by the end of the '80s, records, bass was kind of mixed low on records, and
I know.
And I was, I had gotten big time into drugs and drinking and all that kind of stuff. So I was kind of getting late. I mean, I still was very passionate about music, but I was kind of getting lazy in some ways. It just didn't seem like bass was as important.
Right. Sure.
And then I did front my own band for a while, and I did play guitar in that.
Yeah.
But when I joined Dio in '93, I just fell in love with bass again. I mean, like hardcore, and then I really got serious. So I started like really listening to Jameson, and all that stuff. So my finger playing, I'm not Billy Sheehan. I mean, not anything like that.
Well, none of us are Billy Sheehan, but
well,
I mean,
right.
But you're really an underrated player in that you're one of those guys, and I'll say it because I said it to you before. I saw you guys open for Kiss in '85, I guess it was. Sure. And it was a big deal to me, to get to see Dokken, because we'd all loved Dokken already. But the fact that, getting to see Kiss is a big deal. I lived in a small town. This is Saskatchewan. So in Canada. So when concerts would come to our neck of the woods, it was a big deal. But when Kiss and Dokken are coming to town, that was a massive deal. I mean,
yeah, it was a good tour.
It was great. And getting to see you guys was so, because what I was really surprised by was how much of the show I was just glued to you, because there was, correct me if I'm wrong, but did you have a keyboard on stage?
Yes, I did.
There was was there Taurus
and Taurus
pedals? Yeah. And I was just kind of like, and meanwhile you're singing like a bird. I was just kind of like knocked out by the fact that, because Lynch is Lynch, and he's just, he just plants himself and he throws down, and you're like, well, yeah, he's the guy, and it's Don, it's, and Mick and the whole thing. But I was really taken aback by like how musical your world was, like I was just kind of like, wow, I never really thought of it in that context. Geddy Lee, obviously, you think of, the ability to kind of do all of that and chew gum somehow at the same time or whatever,
Right.
But no, I was really knocked out by your musicality, which wasn't just about the four strings, was the voice, the keyboards, all that.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because I'm old enough that I think my influences were the same as Geddy Lee's,
Sure.
in that, I mean, yeah, Geddy was an influence, but really it was the Squires and a lot of the prog guys that got me into like Taurus pedals, and then the keyboard thing. I think the keyboard thing just kind of happened with Dokken because we wanted some extra textures, and we had done some stuff on records, and we thought it'd be cool.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. I thought.
And so that's kind of where that all came from. Yeah, I mean, I love music, and I like it to be musical.
Well, and you seem to be a kind of guy who was kind of like up for the challenge of like, hey, absolutely. We should do the keyboards here, and
being able play and sing and do all,
and being able to do it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But so at what age are you, like, you know, in Washington or wherever you are at this point, when you start getting into it? Do you start knocking it around with other guys, like playing in a garage or basements?
Right. I was probably 14 because I remember I moved. Actually, I might have even still been 13. I probably was.
Did you win best worst singer contest?
Well, you know what's funny is this was so early days garage thing that we didn't even deal with singing.
Yeah, you
know?
just
I
kind
mean,
of no microphones.
Who could have a PA or a microphone?
Yeah.
But and I mean, this was 8th grade was jamming with the little amps in somebody's bedroom. You know, that was
sometimes 2 or 3 guys plugged into one amp.
Yes. Definitely that. So there was these 2 guitar players that I used to jam with a lot. And you know, we all kind of came up together, you know, started in the bedroom and it's funny, I had some tapes of stuff from 8th grade, you know, our first original.
Wow, that'd be.
I had some tapes of that stuff. And I was staying at a boarding house. This was, you know, over 40 years ago, but I was staying at a boarding house and all my tapes got stolen. Including a tape that I made when I saw Led Zeppelin June 17th, 1972. And it was a phenomenal, for some reason, it was just a record on a cassette, but it was great. And, you know, Plant was singing and it was really amazing. All those got stolen. But anyways, yes. So I had that group of people. And then, you know, as the ages went, as the days went on, we ended up, you know, finding our first drummer and, you know, doing all that stuff. So yeah, junior high, high school, I was, you know, making my way up.
That's amazing. So at what point do you start, like, does it start to become like the thing? Like, I'm going to actually pursue this and like, you know, get hired. Do you get hired by like some older guys that, hey, let's put that kid, or how does this all come about?
I did. Well, the first thing that happened was, okay, I love this. Now we have drummers and everything. So I think by 9th grade, we were playing dances, high school dances and things like that. You know, very, you know, weekend kind of thing. But definitely by 10th grade, and by the time I had gotten into prog music and Squire and all that, then I knew, okay, I'm going to do this for a living. And then I started getting into club bands, you know, and so throughout high school, I would, you know, play till 2 or 3 in the morning, come in. And what was great is I had to keep my grades up though, in order for my parents to let me do all this, which I did. Yeah. But I had like some amazing teachers. I had a teacher that he was my homeroom teacher that I had for the first 2 periods. And he was really cool.
That's great.
He made a deal with me. As long as I keep getting A's, he would let me sit in the back and sleep the first 2 periods. And I did.
Wow.
And then that would give me some sleep. He kind of instinctively knew that was a good thing to do. But yeah, I started playing in, you know, clubs and, you know, earning a little bit of money so I could buy better gear. And I knew it was what I was going to do. I assumed I was going to follow the traditional route because I did indeed go to University of Washington as a music major.
That's so cool.
I tried that, but you know, once I got there and realized, oh, this is a whole different world than rock and roll. I realized that's what I want to do. So,
so is that when you pack up the truck and head to Beverly?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, at first I was living in Seattle and I was going to the University of Washington, and I went about a year and a half. And then, you know, by then I had found musicians and joined bands, and like I said, was really into prog at this point. And playing in a prog band, we were called Christmas.
I've read this.
Yeah. And before Motley Crue had the name. Anyways, very proggy. But in order to make a living, we also, the same 3 guys, because it was keyboards, bass, and drums, like an ELP sort of setup.
Oh, cool.
And I would play a double neck. Sometimes I play guitar, and I played the Taurus pedals. So that was my intro into all that stuff.
Wow.
Anyway, but we also had a group called, the same guys, we also had a lounge band that we called the Merrymakers. And we would play clubs to to earn a living.
Like literal lounge music?
Like, you know, perfect. I love you just the way you are, you know, all those kind of songs.
Perfect. Yeah.
So, but anyway, that was.
Well, it's better than digging a ditch. Let's be honest.
It's way better than digging a ditch.
Yeah.
And it got me through until that all kind of fell apart, and I ended up moving to California, And first I moved to San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
And played with Mike Varney. And that's where Mike
right.
Varney and I made a connection, which was really critical. And
that's an invaluable connection right there.
Yeah. And ironically enough, I got a text from him this morning. I mean,
did you? Wow, that's great.
Which he must have written last night because he stays up till like 8 in the morning. But anyway,
we still, Jesus,
he's still a night owl. Yeah.
Wow, God bless.
But through Mike, you know, I did the first professional record I ever did, which was called Rock Justice up in San Francisco. But then when I moved to LA in '83, he was the one that connected me with Dokken.
So yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I know Rock Justice is like an actual musical, isn't it?
It was a musical, a rock opera.
Rock opera, that's what it was. Yeah, that's so. Who else was involved in that? Anybody else we would know?
Well, the drummer was Leonard Hayes from Y&T.
Yeah, of course.
Who, in fact, Leonard and Mike Varney and I were a band for a while called Cinema, which was the band of the rock opera, but we also were trying to, you know, be our own band on the side. It was a very pop kind of thing.
Cool.
Kind of Todd Rundgren meets Cheap Trick or something.
Very cool. Wow.
Very
that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you heard it now, it sounds pretty dated and like pretty corny, but it was great at that time. And
Sure,
I loved Leonard. I loved playing with Leonard. You know, Leonard has passed away a few years
of course. Yeah, that's too.
But,
I always thought like when it changed the entire vibe of Y&T when he was no longer there. I was always like, we loved Leonard because Leonard was such like he was almost like a Bunny Carlos in that he didn't look like an 80s rock guy. He looked like just a dude. Yeah.
But he was the heart and soul. He was the personality of the band.
Totally.
I mean, Dave is the heart and soul. Dave,
of course,
fabulous and so talented and everything. But something definitely changed when Leonard left. But anyway, but that's I understand what happened and all that. But who else? The Bill Spooner from the Tubes was in it.
Oh wow.
Anybody else you'd know? I don't think many other names that you would know.
I would love to hear this thing because I've read it about it several times. It's come up in conversation or something like that, and I go, you know what? Did Mike put it out through his thing or where did it?
No, it was actually on EMI. We actually
it was okay.
Yeah, I mean honestly, the record didn't come out very good. It was pretty. We didn't know what we were doing, and
sure,
Marty Ballin from the Starship was kind of partly his brainchild, but when it came to recording the record, he wasn't all that involved, and you know, we were a bunch of kids running around a studio not knowing what the hell we were doing.
But what a great apprenticeship for you to kind of like get that.
Yeah, it was a learning experience, but I think more than anything, I learned what not to do.
But we all know that's just as important. I mean, you know,
it is important. You're right.
So when you get to LA, are you aware of Dokken by this point? Because it's weird to me because I've watched or not watched, but I remember back then that first album has Juan Crucier on the back of the album. You're like the dude from Rat, you know, and then I heard Peter Baltz from like
that's who actually played on the record.
Yeah, from Accept played on there because they had some sort of German connection or something, didn't they?
Basically, Don went to Germany kind of when the whole new wave thing hit LA. Somebody put a bug in his ear and said, "Well, you should go to Europe because Europe still loves metal."
Okay,
so he did. Okay, smartly. I mean, I think Don can be very, very smart about those.
That's
things.
Pretty bold to do. Yeah,
it was bold, but smart. And he connected with Dieter Dierks, and basically they did demos for what he was calling Dokken. And in the demos, they recorded one of George Lynch's songs that he had for a band called Exciter in L.A.
Right,
and of course, this is way pre-internet, so Don didn't know what the lyrics to George's song was, so he made up his own. And that was a song called Paris is Burning.
Right.
And they basically got a deal off that. So when Don got the deal, he called Mick Brown to see if he wanted to play drums, and Mick said, "Well, I'll do it, but you got to take George with me. You know, George has to come with me. It's a package deal."
Right.
Don said yes, and you know, I think the fact is when George, you know, one of the first things George found out is that Don had gotten a deal off a song that he had written, but Don had co-written inadvertently by just changing the lyrics.
I love that it starts right away. It starts crazy.
Yeah, right away. It didn't get off to a great start, but anyway,
or a great finish. Just kidding.
But yeah. But it was a good little run, and that's how that whole boat left the station.
So then Varney, clearly the bass player position was kind of a revolving door of sorts until you came.
Well, when I moved to LA, it was in the spring of '83, and Breaking the Chains didn't actually come out till September. So I actually joined in August.
Okay.
I joined another top 40 band when I moved to LA, and when Don called Varney and put us together, the record hadn't been out yet, so it was actually good timing. So no, I hadn't heard of them. I moved to LA because I knew it was more happening than the Bay Area at the time.
Right.
And there was all these up and coming bands. I didn't really know about any of that stuff at that point, but I got a crash course when I met the guys. And
I bet.
So yeah, I joined in August, and the record came out in September. We did the video, boom,
and it's off to the races. So, but you're joining the group was kind of like, isn't necessarily like you're joining a multi-platinum act.
No.
They're still ascending at this point.
Yeah. Which meant that I kind of got associated with the band. A lot of people, of course, know that Juan had been in the band and Peter played on the record, but I kind of got associated with it, even though I'm not on the first record.
Yeah, but the reality is, once you're in the group, that's the lineup. Everybody knows as the quintessential Dokken lineup.
And the first video came out with us, and
totally. So and then, but you're there part of the process, watching it grow into becoming a very successful band. Yeah,
sure,
so
absolutely.
And
they were always very cool with me, and we always shared everything equally. I mean, as ego driven as Dokken was, there was a lot of things about it that were actually very cool. We all, when it came to songwriting, we all, whatever makes the song the best. We were always of that.
Yeah, and your contributions are huge. I mean, Just Got Lucky. Go down the list. There's a lot of things that you're a big part of. Yeah.
And like I say, and that was the cool thing. That was what really made me want to join the band, because it wasn't like a lot of money or anything at first, but they really wanted to be musical, and our managers at the time were like saying to me, do it, bring your musicality into the band, let's use it. And I thought, wow, that's fabulous. And like I say, when George and I immediately clicked on the chemistry of writing,
right?
So it was a great situation for me. I was very, very happy.
Yeah, but not only was Dokken, taking off, the whole scene was taking off. Really,
right,
you guys are early days. Like we're talking pre-Motley Crue,
Yeah, but our success was later. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, Dokken was a slow build. Rat was right out the gate, Round and Round, huge hit.
Right, sure, yeah.
Which is why Juan made the decision he made. Of course.
Yeah, of course,
very smartly, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, Motley, Rat, Quiet Riot, they were huge, and we were a slow build, which a slow build can be a good thing. Not that they exist anymore.
No, I know that's
then there was still, and we had a record label that was very committed to breaking the band, and they were patient with us, and they built it, and it was a whole different music business back then.
Oh, 100%. It's almost unrecognizable to today, isn't it?
No, not at all. And had we not had that infrastructure around us, nothing would have happened. It was pretty amazing that happened.
It's an interesting thing, because a lot of those, like even in the 70s, Cheap Trick, Kiss, Aerosmith, they all needed a few records to build.
Exactly. I mean, most of the great bands did. know.
Yeah.
And that's why it's a shame that everything is so, fly by night kind of thing now, flash in the pan or whatever you want to call it. It's just not geared to long-term musical careers like it was.
No.
That's a shame.
Even in the 90s, I remember an A&R guy once saying to me, like, back in the day, you had 3 albums to build. Now you have like 3 weeks of your first single. And I was like,
that's true.
Yeah.
And that's true. And that's just a drag.
It is a drag, because how many great things are getting lost in the mix just by, because you don't have like a Cheap Trick that can build to become like such a great thing. But clearly Dokken was, benefited from that kind of the right infrastructure, management, label.
Oh boy, did we?
Yeah.
Did we ever?
So yeah. So anyway, and how long was that lineup together before you finally, the 4 of you kind of went different directions.
We
It seems like I'm only saying it seems like it was like 20 years, but things go so fast when you look back and you're like, man, wasn't that long, really.
No. It was 6 years, really.
Wow.
We officially broke up in March of '89.
Okay.
We had just put out a live record, and we put one new song on it that we recorded in the studio for that.
That's right. Yeah. I
And
remember
that. And that was in '88. And we pretty much knew that was the end of the line when we were doing that live record. We'd recorded it in Japan, and that was kind of the last great tour that we had in the '80s, because the Monsters of Rock tour that we did after Japan, we just weren't very good. We're like
Metallica was like one of the.
They were under us. And they were killing us every night, as you'd think. But mostly though because we just didn't have it together. George had really let the fact that we were going to break up disturb him, and it affected his stage performance, which made me angry.
Right.
Come on, man, be a pro.
Right.
But he couldn't help it. It was his heart was breaking. Don,
totally.
Don had other plans. He kind of knew what he wanted to do.
He'd already kind of moved on mentally, kind of thing.
Yeah, I'd say so. And
that's a shame.
So it was a drag that we left the '80s kind of not on a high note at all. So we broke up in March of '89.
Yeah, and knowing what was coming, unfortunately, like in retrospect, to look back and realize that the '90s were going to be such a gnarly shift, that it would have been great to kind of go out and just really hammer that last run.
Well, and that's the thing we always talk about. Our managers, in trying to discourage us from breaking up, sat us down and they said, look, if you guys do one more record, we know that we're set up now where we could do a big headlining tour.
Right.
This is how much you'll all make, worst case scenario. And they showed us the figure. And so I thought it was insane that we broke up.
Right.
I thought it was just an insane move. And, Don thought he was going to be able to somehow take the name Dokken and just run with it.
Right.
It turned out not to be that easy. So, yes, it was a bad decision to break up, but, I look back at it, it gave us the opportunity to come back later on in the '90s, and it was in a lesser capacity, of course, but it gave us some longevity, I think.
But it says a lot about the chemistry. I mean, and it's, it's a fancy word, but it's true. Those four guys, you can take it and you can try and put a new spin on it, but it's not the same. Even though Don Dokken can go off and do that, it's sort of like it. I mean, there's probably a number of factors in the timing of all that and whatnot too. But there was something to be said about that thing. And objectively, I would have been one of those people going like, "Are you crazy? You guys are fine."
Yeah.
But I understand. It's like the personalities and the thing. It's art, and artists can be.
And it had gotten ugly. And, for me, I was doing a lot of drugs.
Yeah.
And Don wasn't doing cocaine like we were, but he was doing a lot of downers. So it was just a weird vibe and chemistry, and it was ugly. And then, like I say, I think Don looked at it like, Don had some reasons to be complaining. There was definitely he had some points. But I think what he thought was, well, fuck it. I'm just going to get rid of these guys and be Dokken on my own. But he legally couldn't do it. And I tried to warn him. But anyway, but it was what it was.
It was what it was. I mean, but that's the thing, is to have something that's such a footnote for you, like when you try to move on, even all these years later, we're still talking about Dokken. It's like, but
which I don't mind. I mean, I'm very, very cool about it.
I understand. Yeah. But there's, when you get into the Dio thing, which must've been a real trip, that lineup, and getting to play next to that guy every night must've been,
well, that was the thing,
a real awakening.
And, it was Vinny, Tracy, Ronnie, and I, and Vinny was already a dear friend who had played in my band War and Peace and Flesh and Blood.
That's right.
And we were really, really tight, and both as friends, and we loved playing together. And Ronnie was a really close friend too. So the Dio time was it was such a breath of fresh air for me after the Dokken negativity and the thing where you're wishing the other guy to do bad, that kind of thing. That
Right.
all of a sudden we're supportive of each other, and
Sure.
there's friendships. We go have dinner after rehearsal, have fun together, and it was it was just and we kicked ass.
Right.
That was the thing. It was really, really, really fun. It was focused. Like I say, it gave me new life on bass, and it gave me new life about playing music, and that was a great thing, because it was the '90s when that kind of thing was, when rock was, there was
suffering.
definitely two branches going on.
It's actually weird to think of that now, to look back on it, because I know so many guys from that scene that still carry that kind of the scars of that particular change, where they're almost afraid, like if you're writing songs now, they're afraid to have any sort of like mark of anything that sort of reminds them of the 80s, in a sense. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. We've come full circle now. Like, people are like, really, they love like rock, and they want, especially in markets like South America or Japan, all these different markets, they want to rock, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that was such a tough time, but it probably taught you, because now that you're like, now again, your musicality, then you move into like the studio abilities that you do with so much producing now, and multiple projects, and I don't want to, there's so many things we could talk about. Like you just mentioned Flesh and Blood and that whole thing, because that to me is an important thing to talk about, because you as a vocalist, I think, is a very and the TNN project and all that kind of stuff, you as a vocalist, I think is important to focus on that, because I think you really have a lot going on in that realm.
Well, thank you. For me now, producing is a huge passion, and
Totally,
I love doing it. And I don't mind being unapologetically 80s on some of the production.
No.
Because that is what people want, and it's fun to do. But that, I feel very, very lucky, because I've got this wonderful studio. I get to play with great musicians. I get to write with great people. It's not, the same business that it was in the 80s, but what it is now has its own unique qualities.
Totally.
And I try to embrace those. You're not going to sell 1 million records, but you can still make great music. You can still feel great about it. You can still make some people happy. And it's just what I do. It's what I love to do. So, I'm sometimes the ambition behind things can affect you in ways where your motives aren't as pure.
Right.
Right now, everything's kind of been taken away. Mm-hmm. And so your motives kind of have to be pure in order to make music that has any substance to it anymore. And I'm trying to embrace that.
Yeah.
And just enjoy the moment. That's if anything that this pandemic taught me, it's about patience, gratitude, and enjoying the moment. Because that's where I'm at.
That's great, man, because it's really nice to hear. And you're absolutely right, because when you take away the fact that we live in a day and age, especially creatively and musically, where records aren't selling the way that they used to sell. So you're right. To make music, you better love making music. You better love you better love playing music. You better love all those aspects. And it's great that there are labels like Frontiers and Rat Pack and all these different kind of ones that really create a thing that, for someone like yourself, can really facilitate a whole bunch of stuff. The fact that like Black Swan, I know Matt Starr and Robin very well. I don't know Reb very well, but I mean, it's funny when you talk about like 80s isms to it. I go, I don't really feel that way. Like, I listened to that record. I know there's a new one coming because those guys have been kind of hipping me to it. So I actually feel like it has the right elements of that stuff, but I feel like it's very modern in its own way. You know what I mean?
Well, thank you. What our goal is to write music that we love.
Sure.
And just, make it fresh and inspired, because then it doesn't matter, distorted guitars and big drum sounds, is that,
and the singer sings high. Yeah.
And the singer sings high.
Yeah. It sort of defines the entire genre. Like,
Right. And if we
the guitar player plays fast, it's like,
but honestly, I mean, that's one of the things that's so fun about Black Swan, because Reb loves that music.
Yeah, yeah,
That's his wheelhouse, and he's in
totally.
heaven. And we
Yeah,
love to work together. We love to write together. Um, and um, and it's so fun. You know, when
totally.
you love it like that, it's so much fun. And Robin is just such a fabulous vocalist, and
He
such a
is.
and his writing has just been so amazing. And he has even told me that this is where he feels creatively fulfilled.
Totally.
And that's kind of where everyone's at. And to have that feeling in a band, you know, even though we're not a traditional band where all four of us get together, work on the basic tracks and rehearse, you know, even though it's not like that, which I wish it was, but it can't be. Um, but we get as close to that as we can, because everybody is so focused, and everybody so knows what they want out of that genre, and it makes for some great music.
And that's kind of part of the beauty of these days, is the fact that if you have an anchor thing, like in your case Foreigner,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
in Reb's
yeah,
case Whitesnake, or whatever, and you could do these kind of fun things where back in the day that would be like, what are you talking about? First of all,
yeah. That would have been frowned upon, and I
and you wouldn't have
wonder.
had time to do it. You really wouldn't have had time to do it.
Well, and it would have been considered a conflict. You know, I mean,
Totally. Yeah.
if you were the bass player in such and such a band, that's what you did.
Totally.
Um, Now it simply can't be like that. You know,
Yeah.
it's funny because, you know, Eddie Trunk and I go back and forth on this all the time, because he's like, you know, isn't it better when you're only in one band? And like, well,
It isn't. It
yeah,
isn't. Yeah. But
ideally, yes,
yeah.
but because
Yeah.
that's an impossibility,
Yeah.
embrace all the great music that's coming out. And, you know, certainly when I'm doing a project, I'm 100% into it, whether I have 3 or 4 of those projects or not, you
Of
know?
course, yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's I always say there's 52 weeks in the year, and if one of those projects only takes up this many weeks, well, what am I supposed to do for the rest of it? Just sit around, wait for the phone to ring, and
Yeah, yeah,
or whatever it is. It's kind of like we're musicians, we're music, we love
yeah,
playing music. So when the phone rings and it's whoever, and they go, hey, you want to do this? Especially during COVID, that's been happening a bunch. You're like, of
yeah, yeah,
course, I'm sitting at home not doing anything. Let's make some music. So
right.
um I think that you're exactly right, because when your resume has gotten even crazier in the past, like say 10 years, more than it was before then. And
Oh, yeah,
in the advent of you getting into Foreigner, I was like, it wasn't just like then he was in Foreigner and he rode off into the sunset. It's like, no,
right.